Tonight we will begin the Metamorphoses of Ovid, translated by Arthur Golding. Whereas in my reading of Plato's Symposium, I skipped the intro. With this, I'm going to read the whole thing cover to cover. Cornell University Library. Let's see. Of this edition of Shakespeare's Ovid, 350 copies were printed on handmade paper and 12 on real vellum, of which 300 on handmade paper and 10 on real vellum are for sale in England, number 201. The King's Library, edited by Professor Gallant's. The De la Moore Press Folios, 3, Ovid's Metamorphoses. The King's Library, London, Alexander Mooring, The De la Moore Press, 298 Regent Street, West. Shakespeare's Ovid, being Arthur Golding's translation of the Metamorphoses, edited by W.H.D. Rouse, Littd. The 15 books of P. Udius Naso, entitled Metamorphoses, translated out of Latin into English meter by Arthur Golding, Gentleman, a work very pleasant and delectable. With skill, heed, and judgment, this work must be read, for else to the reader it stands in small stead. Imprinted 1567, imprinted at London by William Series. As the soul of Euphorbus was thought to live in Pythagoras, so witty soul of Ovid lives in mellifluous and honey-tongued Shakespeare, thus lives. Francis Meres, 1578. Ovidius Naso was the man, and why indeed Naso, but for smelling out of the odoriferous flowers of fancy the jerks of invention. Love's Labour's Lost. Then we have the contents page, introduction. Shakespeare and Ovid. Amongst the direct sources of Shakespeare's work, after North's Plutarch and Holinshed, probably the most important was Ovid. The Fausti, Herodias, and the Metamorphoses were just such works as would be most likely to impress a young mind. And Shakespeare's early ambition seems to have been the English Ovid, whilst accident made him a dramatist. Thus, in his Lucretia and his Venus and Adonis, he directly challenges comparison. His themes are of the same romantic and imaginative stuff, his method the same rich and picturesque description, and the motto upon the title of Venus and Adonis shows that he took the attempt seriously. In this respect, he judged truly of his powers, although he enormously underestimated them. Other dramatists have portrayed the doings and the fate of men so as to move our souls, but no other has taken us into fairyland and made imps and fays live before us as Shakespeare has done. Ben Jonson and Middleton have done something for demons and witches. Goethe has realized a devil, but with Shakespeare alone, the world of fairy seems to be real and reasonable as flesh and blood. Professor T.S. Baines has shown by a detailed examination that Shakespeare knew the grammar school course. In Holofernes, the poet represents the pedantic teaching which might have been heard in many a country schoolroom, and shows his familiarity with various methods of instruction then in vogue, the technical terms of rhetoric and the favorite authors. There are, besides, many references and allusions in Shakespeare to the classical authors, which in part may but need not be due to floating knowledge. In particular, it is clear that he knew Ovid in the original. On the title page of Venus and Adonis, one of the 3 works which he published himself, under his own name. He places the following motto taken from the Amoris, which was not yet translated into English. Vilia meritur vulgus mihi flavus Apollo pocula castalia plena ministret aqua. He makes two quotations from Heroides and one from the Metamorphoses. The selection of Titania as the name of his fairy queen seems to be due to the text of the Metamorphoses, where it frequently occurs as an epithet of various goddesses, such as Diana, Latona, Circe, Hecate. The name does not occur in Golding's translation, where it is always paraphrased, and it happily sums up the magical and mystic associations of mythology. A large number of tales and episodes found in Ovid are referred to or used by Shakespeare, especially in his earlier plays. In Titus Andronicus, for instance, the treatment of Lavinia is borrowed from the tragic tale of Philomel. To enter now upon detailed examinations of his allusions would be out of place. The Bodleian Ovid. There is, however, another piece of evidence which deserves to be mentioned. In the Bodleian Library is a copy of Ovid's Metamorphoses, printed by Aldus in 1502, which bears on the title page the signature WMSHR, and opposite is written in what appears to be a 17th century hand. This little book of Ovid was given to me by W. Hall, who said it was once Will Shakespeare's, TN 1682. John Hall, it will be remembered, married Shakespeare's daughter, Susanna. The genuineness of the inscriptions has of course been questioned, but there is nothing about them to suggest forgery. It has been pertinently remarked that a forger would hardly have abbreviated the name. He would have been likely, we may add, to write J. Hall instead of W. Hall, and to give more information than the initials T.N. The vague elusiveness is in their favor, and probably they would have been at once accepted, but that the find was felt to be too good to be true. The book has been used by more than one person for study. One has written in a fine, minute hand meanings and paraphrases in Latin above the text throughout the earlier part of the volume. Many verses have been underlined, especially in the earlier books, and very few pages but show some marks of use. There are also marginal scribblings and caricatures which are carelessly done and do not appear to be as old as the rest. Early translations of Ovid. Ovid was a favorite with the early translators. Caxton prepared for the press but did not print a translation of the Metamorphoses, and Wynken de Worde printed in 1513 selections from The Art of Love. After the middle of the 16th century, there are, besides Golden, Tuberville's Heroides, 1567, Underdown's Ibis, 1569, and Churchyard's Tristia, 1580. Later we have Marlowe's Elegies, the Amours, 1597, and Brown's Remedy of Love, 1599, and others in the early years of the 17th century. Golding's Ovid. Besides these, the two pamphlets deserve mention as forerunners of Golding. One is The Pleasant Fable of Hermaphroditus and Salmacis, translated by Thomas Pinde, 1565. The title of the second deserves quoting in full. The Fable of Ovid, treating of Narcissus, translated out of Latin into English meter, with a moral thereunto very pleasant to read. God resteth the proud in every place, but unto the humble he giveth grace. Therefore trust not to riches, beauty, nor strength. All these be vain, and shall consume at length. Imprinted at London by Thomas Hackett, and are to be sold at his shop in Canning Street over against the Three Cranes. The contents of this pamphlet, which is not paged, are these: the printer to the book, the argument of the fable, Ovid's fable, 4 pages in couplets, lines of 12 syllables and 14 syllables alternately, the moralization of the fable in Ovid of Narcissus, 16 pages and 7-line stanzas, imprint on reverie woodcut of hunters with bows and dogs. The title suggests Golding's own, so pleasant and delectable, with its doggerel couplet. The publication of the pamphlet may have suggested the work to young Golding. Perhaps he may even have owed something to the meter, which differs from Golding's own by a pause in place of a foot in the first line of each couplet. The long line had, however, already been used for a similar purpose by Thomas Fair in his 7 first books of the Aeneades of Virgil, 1558, continued in 1562. But if Golding owed a suggestion to his predecessor, he owed little else, as a brief extract will show. This man the fearful hearts, enforcing to his nets the calling nymph one day, beheld that neither ever lets to talk to those that speak, nor yet hath the power of speech before by echo. This I mean, the daubler of screech. 5 years after the publication of the fable of Ovid treating of Narcissus, Golding printed his first attempt of the Metamorphoses under the following title: the first Fower books of P. Ovidius Nasso's work, entitled Metamorphoses, translated out of Latin into English, meter by Arthur Golding, gentleman, a work very pleasant and delectable. With skill, heed, and judgment this work must be read, for else to the reader it stands in small stead. Imprinted by London by William Series, anno 1565. This is followed by a prose dedication to Robert, Earl of Leicester. To the Right Honourable and his singular good Lord Robert, Earl of Leicester, Baron of Denbigh, Knight of the most noble order of the Garter, etc., Arthur Golding, gentleman, wisheth continuance of health, with prosperous estate and felicity. If this work was fully performed, with like eloquence and conning of an editing by me in English, as it was written by the author thereof in his mother tongue, this is in Old English, just bear with me. It might be perchance to delight your honor to bestow some vacant time in the reading of it, for the number of excellent devices and fine inventions contrived in the same, purporting outwardly most pleasant tales and delectable histories, and frauded inwardly with most pithy instructions and wholesome examples, and containing both ways most exquisite cunning and deep knowledge. Wherefore, to countervail my default, I request most humbly the benefit of your favor, whereby you are wont not only to bear with the want of skill and rudeness of such as commit their doings to your protection, but are also wont to encourage them to proceed in their painful exercises, attempted of a zeal and desire to enrich their native language with things not heretofore published in the same, the assured hope and confidence whereof, furthered by the privileges of the new year, which of an ancient and laudable custom licenseth men to testify their good wills, not only to their friends and acquaintances, but also to their betters and superiors, by presents, though never so simple, giveth me boldness to dedicate this my maimed and imperfect translation of the first 4 books of Ovid's Metamorphoses unto your honor, and to offer it unto you for a poor New Year's gift, I confess not correspondent to your worthiness or my desire, but yet agreeable to the state of the giver, the which, if it may please you to take in good part, I accompt my former travel herein sufficiently recompensed, and I think myself greatly enforced to persevere in the full accomplishment of all the whole work, and thus beseeching God to send your honor many prosperous and joyful New Years. I cease to trouble you any further at this time. At Cecil House, the XXIIJ of December anno 1564, your good L. most humbly to command Arthur Golding. The preface in verse to the reader appears in the same form as the complete work with a very few small differences. The omission of 2 lines and the following 4 in place of lines. I propose now, if God permit, as here I have begun, so through all Ovid's turned shapes with restless race to run, until such time as bringing him acquainted with our tongue, he may alike in English verse as in his own be song. When the task was done, these lines had need to be altered to suit the case. The text of the 4 books is substantially the same as that of the latter editions. The chief variants are noted in the appendix. Each book is separately numbered by the folios. The peculiarities of spelling more resemble the first than the second edition. A comparison of the 4 books and the 2 first editions will show that the work was revised. There are a very large number of small changes in words and in order, and corrections of defective meter, which make the second edition on the whole better than the first. Sometimes the second introduces new faults of its own, but these are all due to careless printing. In a few cases, a line or a couplet has been recast. To take a few examples, some errors are repeated from the 4 books. Others were correct in that issue. There are also a considerable number of smaller misprints, such as the omission of a letter, and it gives, I'm not going to read the examples. The differences of spelling between the 2 editions have not been recorded in the notes, but they are sufficiently interesting to deserve notice. Edition 2 affects double vowels as be, he, she, we, do, to, mother, more, looks, believed, grieved, clear, fear, field, year. The symbols oo and ee in the black letter are each a composite type, the latter being accented as a rule, but the same peculiarities show themselves in the epistle to 4 books, where Roman type is used and the 2 symbols oo and ee are separate. This must therefore be regarded as a spelling definitely preferred. Other peculiarities are bin, blood, breath, death, here, heart, here, wex. These are all like Old English spellings. But edition 2 is not consistent, and probably every variety of spelling is to be found there. It is also to be noticed that in the 7th book of edition 1, a change takes place in the spelling, which approximates the latter half of edition 1 to edition 2. Some of the peculiarities of edition 1 and edition 2 appear also in the epistle and preface to edition 1. 4 books uses the double letters, but partakes of the peculiarities of both. The 4 books present another peculiarity, in beginning many lines with a small letter. This is done very frequently when the sentence runs on from line to line, and its principle may be seen from a comparison of the passage where a small letter begins the following lines. In the complete editions, the initial small letter is found now and again, but apparently by accident. Shakespeare and Golding. There is no doubt that Shakespeare used Golding. In The Tempest, Prospero cries, "Ye elves of hills, brooks, standing lakes and groves," echoing the works of Golding. "Ye airs and winds, ye elves of hills, of brooks, of woods alone, of standing lakes, and of the night, approach ye, every one." In Venus and Adonis, there is a description of the boar. "On his bow-back he hath the battle set of bristly pikes, that ever threat his foes. His eyes like glow-worms shine when he doth fret. His brawny sides with hairy bristles armed are better proof than thy spear's point can enter, with which compare Golding. His eyes did glister blood and fire, right dreadful was to see his brawned neck, right dreadful was his hair which grew as thick with pricking points as one of them could well by others stick, and like a front of armed pikes, set close in battle ray, the sturdy bristles on his back stood staring up all way. A description of the storm in Othello also recalls Golding. Golding's life and works. Little is known of the translator's life. Arthur Golding was born about 1536 and died early in the 17th century. He was connected by marriage with John de Vere, Earl of Oxford, and a friend of Sir Philip Sidney. He seems to have written nothing original except a discourse upon the earthquake that happened through this realm of England and other places of Christendom, the 6th April, 1580, and a copy of verses in praise of Barrett's Alvier prefixed to that work in the same year, but his translations were many. Amongst them are several of Calvin's works, a treatise concerning offenses, commentaries upon the prophet Daniel, sermons upon the book of Job, sermons upon the epistle of St. Paul to the Ephesians, and from Nicholas Hemming, apostle or exposition of the gospel. He also completed Sir P. Sidney's translation of de Mornay's History of Christianity, 1589. One of these was dedicated to the Earl of Leicester. From David Chytraeus he translated Apostolar Orders disposing of certain epistles usually read in the Church of God, 1570. He touches the drama with his version of Theodore Beza's Tragedy of Abraham's Sacrifice, finished at Powell's Belchamp in Essex, the 11th day of August, 1575. His classical translations are Ovid's Metamorphoses, 1565-7, 1575, 1587, 1603, 1612, Justin, 1564, Pomponius Mela, 1585, Seneca on Benefits, 1578, and Caesar, 1563, 1565, 1590. He also translated a number of other works on historical and theological subjects. This edition. This is a reprint of a copy of the first edition, 1567, by the Cambridge University Library, the original spelling being retained except that J and V are written for I and U according to modern custom, and an occasional small letter at the beginning of a line has been replaced by a capital. But all misprints have been corrected, usually from my own copy of the second edition, the exact reading of the first being recorded in the critical notes. Names which run together have been separated, abbreviations are expanded. Ampersand and, Q quoth, and WCHY, C and YT, and so forth, unless there was no room in the line. The punctuation is mainly that of the original, but not always. A few faults escaped in the printing are corrected in the notes. These all are mistakes in spelling. It can hardly be hoped that there are no other such, but the text is believed to be accurate. Enemy stands once or twice for Emily, the sheets having been printed off before I discovered that the spelling was deliberately adopted. It remains to thank my friend, Professor Gallant, for his assistance and criticism in the compilation of this introduction. To the Right Honourable and his singular good lord, Robert Earl of Leicester, Baron of Denbigh, Knight of the most noble order of the Garter, etc., Arthur Golding, gentleman, wisheth continuance of health, with prosperous estate and felicity. The Epistle. At length my chariot wheel about the mark hath found the way, and at their weary race's end my breathless horses stay. The work is brought to end by which the author did account, and rightly, with eternal fame above the stars to mount. For whatsoever hath been writ of ancient time in Greek, by sundry men dispersedly, and in the Latin eke, of this same dark philosophy of turned shapes, the same hath Ovid into one whole mass in this book brought in frame. For kind of things in this his work the poet doth contain, that nothing under heaven doth aye in steadfast state remain. And next, that nothing perisheth, but that each substance takes another shape than that it had. Of these 2 points he makes the proof by showing through his work the wonderful exchange of goddess, men, beasts, and elements to sundry shapes right strange, beginning with creation of the world and man of slime, and so proceeding with the turns that happen till his time. Then showeth he the soul of man from dying to be free, by samples of the noble men, who for their virtues be accounted and canonized, for goddess by heathen men, and by the pains of limbo lake and blissful state again of spirits in the Elysian fields. And though that of these 3 he make discourse dispersedly, yet specially they be discussed in the latter book, in that oration, where he bringeth in Pythagoras, dissuading men from fear of death, and preaching abstinence from flesh of living things. But as for that opinion which Pythagoras there brings of souls removing out of beasts 2 men, and out of men 2 birds, and beasts both wild and tame, both to and fro again, it is not to be understand of that same soul whereby we are endowed with reason and discretion from on high, but of that soul or life, the which brute beasts as well as we enjoy. 3 sorts of life or soul, for so they term it be, are found in things. The first gives power to thrive, increase, and grow, and this in senseless herbs and trees and shrubs itself doth show. The second giveth power to move, and use of senses 5, and this remains in brutish beasts, and keepeth them alive. Both these are mortal, as the which receive it of the air by force of Phoebus after death, do thither aft repair. The third gives understanding, wit, and reason, and the same is a lonely which with us of soul doth bear the name. And as the second doth contain the first, even so the third containeth both the other twain. And neither beast, nor bird, nor fish, nor herb, nor tree, nor shrub, nor any earthly wight, save only man, can of the same partake the heavenly might. I grant that when our breath doth from our bodies go away, it doth eftsoons return to air, and of that air there may both bird and beast participate, and we of theirs likewise. For while we live, the thing itself appeareth to our eyes. Both they and we draw all one breath. But for to deem or say our noble soul, which is divine and permanent for aye, is common to us with the beasts, I think it nothing less than for to be a point of him that wisdom doth profess. Of this I am right well assured, there is no Christian wight that can be fondness be so far seduced from the right. And finally he doth proceed in showing that not all that bear the name of men, how strong, fierce, stout, bold, hardy, tall, how wise, fair, rich, or highly born, how much renowned by fame soe'er they be, although on earth of goddess they bear the name, are for to be accounted men. But such as under awe of reasons rule continually do live in virtue's law, and that the rest do differ not from beasts, but rather be much worse than beasts, because they do abase their own degree. To natural philosophy the foremost three pertain, the fourth to moral, and in all are pithy, apt and plenty, instructions which import the praise of virtues and the shame of vices, with the due rewards of either of the same. As for example, in the tale of Daphne turned to bay, a mirror of virginity appear unto us may, which yielding neither unto fear, nor force, nor flattery, doth purchase everlasting fame and immortality. In Phaeton's fable, unto sight the poet doth express the natures of ambition blind and youthful wilfulness, the end whereof is misery, and bringeth at the last repentance, when it is too late that all redress is past. And how the weakness and the want of wit and magistrate confoundeth both his common weal and eke his own estate. This fable also doth advise all parents and all such as bring up youth to take good heed of cockering them too much, and further doth commend the mean, and willeth to beware of rash and hasty promises, which most pernicious are, and not to be performed, and in fine it plainly shows what sorrow to the parents and to all the kindred grows by disobedience of the child. And in the child is meant the disobedient subject that against his prince is bent. The transformations of the crow and raven do declare that clawbacks and coal carriers ought wisely to beware of whom, to whom, and what they speak. For sore against his will can any friendly heart abide to hear reported ill the party whom he favoureth. This tale doth eke bewray the rage of wrath and jealousy too have no kind of stay, and that light credit too reports in no wise should be given, for fear that men too late to just repentance should be driven. The fable of Osirui by all such folk is told as are in searching things to come too curious and too bold. A very good example is described in Battis' tale for a covetous people, which for gain do set their tongues to sale, all such as do in flattering freaks and hawks and hounds delight, and dice and cards, and for to spend the time both day and night in foul excess of chamber work, or too much meat and drink. Upon the piteous story of Actaeon ought to think, for these and their adherents used excessive are indeed the dogs that daily do devour their followers on with speed. Tiresias wills inferior folk in any wise to shun, to judge between their betters, least in peril they do run. Narcissus is of scornfulness and pride a mirror clear, where beauty's fading vanity most plainly may appear. And Echo, in the self-same tale, doth kindly represent the lewd behavior of a bawd, and his due punishment. The piteous tale of Pyramus and Thisbe doth contain the heady force of frantic love, whose end is woe and pain. The snares of Mars and Venus show that time will bring to light the secret sins that folk commit in corners or by night. Hermaphrodite and Salmacis declare that idleness is cheerfest, nurse and cherisher of all voluptuousness, and that voluptuous life breeds sin, which linking all together make men to be effeminate, unwieldy, weak, and lither. Rich peers' daughters, turned to pies, do openly declare that none so bold to vaunt themselves as blind as Bayards are. The Muses plainly do declare against the toothier side, that whereas chiefest wisdom is, most mildness doth abide. Arachne may example be that folk should not contend against their betters, nor persist in error to the end. So doth the tale of Niobe and her children, and the transformation of the carles that dwelt in Lycie land, together with the fleeing of Piper, Piper Marcy's skin. The first do also show that long it is ere God begin to pay us for our faults, and that he warns us oft before to leave our folly, but at length his vengeance striketh sore. And therefore that no wight should strive with God in word, nor thought, nor deed, but pride and fond desire of praise have ever wrought confusion too, the parties which of them do make. For some of such a nature be, that if they once do take opinion, be it right or wrong, they rather will agree to die, than seem to take a foil, so obstinate they be. The tale of Tereus, Philomele, and progeny doth contain that folk are blind in things that to their proper weal pertain, and that the man in whom the fire of furious lust doth reign, doth run to mischief like a horse that getteth loose the rein. It also shows the cruel weak of men in their wrath, and that no heinous mischief long delay of vengeance hath. And lastly, that distress doth drive a man to look about and seek all corners of his wits, what way to wind him out. The good success of Jason in the land of Colchis, and the doings of Medea since, do give to understand that nothing is so hard, but pain and travel do it win. For fortune ever favoreth such as boldly do begin, that women both in helping and in hurting have no match when they two either bend their wits. And how that for to catch an honest meaner under fair pretence of friendship is an easy matter. Also, there is warning given of this, that men should never hastily give ear to fugitives, nor into hands of sorcerers commit their stater lives. It shows, in fine, of stepmothers the deadly hate in part, and vengeance most unnatural, that was in mother's heart. The deeds of Theseus are a spur to prowess, and a glass how princes, sons, and noblemen their youthful years should pass. King Minos shows that kings in hand no wrongful wars should take, and what provision for the same they should beforehand make. King Aeacus gives also their example how that kings should keep their promise, and their leagues above all other things. His grave description of the plague and end thereof expressed the wrath of God on man for sin, and how that nevertheless he doth us spare and multiply again for good omen's sake. The whole discourse of Cephalus and Procris mention makes that married folk should warily shun the vice of jealousy, and of suspicion should avoid all causes utterly, reproving, by the way, all such causeless do misdeem the chaste and guiltless for the deeds of those that faulty seem. The story of the daughter of King Nisus setteth out what wicked lust drives folk unto to bring their wills about. And of a righteous judge is given example in the same, who for no meed nor friendship will consent to any blame. We may perceive in Daedalus how every man be kind, desires to be at liberty, and with an earnest mind doth seek to see his native soil, and how that strait distress doth make men and sharks their wits to find their own redress. We also learn by Icarus how good it is to be in mean estate and not climb too high, but to agree to wholesome counsel. For the higher of disobedience is repentance, when it is too late for thinking things amiss. And Partridge tells us that excellence in anything procures men envy, even among those friends whom nature most assures. Philemon and his fear are rules of godly patient life, of sparing thrift and mutual love between the man and wife, of due obedience, and the fear of God, and of reward for good or evil usage showed to wandering strangers' ward. In Erysichthon doth appear a lively image both of wickedness and cruelty, which any wight may loathe, and of the higher that longs thereto. He showeth also plain that whereas prodigality and the gluttony doth reign, a world of riches and of goods are ever with the least, to satisfy the appetite and eye of such a beast. In Hercules and Achilles encounters is set out the nature and behavior of two wooers that be stout, wherein the poet covertly taunts such as being base, do seek by forged pedigrees to seem of noble race, who, when they do perceive no truth upon their side, do stand, instead of reason and of right, to use force and might of hand. This fable also signifies that valiantness of heart consisteth not in words but deeds, and that all sleight and art give place to prowess. Furthermore, in Nessus we may see what breach of promise cometh to, and how that such as be unable for to wreak their harms by force, do oft devise to wreak themselves by policy in far more cruel ways. And Deianira doth declare the force of jealousy deceived through too light belief in fond simplicity. The process following painteth out true manliness of heart, which yieldeth neither unto death, to sorrow, grief, nor smart. And finally, it shows that such as live in true renown of virtue here, have after death an everlasting crown of glory. Cain and Byblos are examples contrary. The maid of most outrageous lust, the man of chastity. The 10th book chiefly doth contain one kind of argument, reproving most prodigious lusts, of such as have been bent to incest most unnatural. And in the latter end it showeth in Hippomenes how greatly folk offend, that are ingrate for their benefits, which God or man bestow upon them in time of need. Moreover, it doth show that beauty, will they nill they, aye doth men in danger throw, and that it is a foolishness to strive against the thing which God before determineth to pass in time to bring. And last of all, Adonis' death doth show that manhood strives against forewarning, though men see the peril of their lives. The death of Orphne showeth God's just vengeance on the vile and wicked sort, which horribly with incest them defile. In Midas of a covetous wretch the image we may see, whose riches justly to himself a hellish torment be. and of a fool whom neither proof nor warning can amend until he feel the shame and smart that folly doth him send. His barber represents all blabs which seem with child to be, until that they have blazed abroad the things they hear or see. And six, an Alcyone appears most constant love, such as between the man and wife to be it doth behove. This six is also a light of princely courtesy and bounty toward such whom need compelleth for to fly. His voyage also doth declare how vainly men are led to utter peril through fond toys and fancies in their head. For idols, doubtful oracles, and soothsayers' prophecies do nothing else but make fools of Fame and blind their bleared eyes. Dedalian's daughter warns to use the tongue with modesty, and not to vaunt with such as are their betters in degree. The siege of Troy, the death of men, the razing of the city, and slaughter of the king Priam stalk without rumours of pity, which in the 12 and 13 books be written, do declare how heinous wilful perjury and filthy whoredom are in sight of God. The frantic fray between the Lapithes and the Centaurs is a note whereby is given to understand the beastly rage of drunkenness. Ulysses doth express the image of discretion, wit, and great advisedness. And Ajax on the other side doth represent a man, stout, heady, ireful, halt of mind, and such a one as can abide to suffer no repulse. And both of them declare how covetous of glory and reward men's natures are. And finally, it showeth plain that wisdom doth prevail in all attempts and purposes, when strength of hand doth fail. The death of fair Polyxena doth show a princely mind and firm regard of honor, rare and graft in womankind. And Polymnestor, king of Thrace, doth show himself to be a glass for wretched covetous folk wherein themselves to see. This story further witnesseth that murder crieth aye for vengeance, and itself one time or other doth bewray. The tale of giant Polypheme doth evidently prove that nothing is so fierce and wild which yieldeth not to love. And in the person of the self-same giant is set out the rude and homely wooing of a country cloyne and lout. The tale of apes reproves the vice of wilful perjury, and willeth people to beware they use not for to lie. Aeneas going down to hell doth show that virtue may in softy trell where it will, and nothing can it stay. The length of life in Sibyl doth declare it is but a vain to wish long life. Such length of life is also length of pain. The Grecian Achaemenides doth learn us how we ought be thankful for the benefits that any man hath wrought. And in this Achaemenides, the poet doth express the image of exceeding fear in danger and distress. What else are Circe's witchcrafts and enchantments than the vile and filthy pleasures of the flesh, which do our souls defile? And what else, herb Molly, than the gift of stayedness and temperance, which doth all foul concupiscence express? The tale of Anaxarete wills dames of high degree to use their lovers courteously, how mean soe'er they be. And Iphis learns inferior folks too fondly not to set their love on such as are too high for their estate to get. A leman's son declares that men should willingly obey what God commands, and not upon exceptions seem to stay. For he will find the means to bring the purpose well about, and in their most necessity dispatch them sofely out. of danger. The oration of Pythagoras implies a sum of all the former work. What person can devise a notabler example of true love and godliness to one's own native country word than Sibbeth doth express? The turning to a blazing star of Julius Caesar shows that fame and immortality of virtuous doing grows. And lastly, by examples of Augustus and a few of other noble princes' sonnets, the author there doth show that noblemen and gentlemen should strive to pass the farm and virtues of their ancestors, or else to match the same. These fables out of every book I have interpreted, to show how they and all the rest may stand a man instead, not adding over curiously the meaning of them all, for that were labor infinite, and tediousness not small, both unto your good lordship and the rest that should them read, who well might think I did the bounds of modesty exceed, if I this one epistle should with matters overcharge, which scarce a book of many quires can well contain at large. And whereas, in interpreting this view, I attribute the things to one, which heathen men to many gods impute, concerning mercy, wrath for sin, and other gifts of grace, describe it for example's sake in proper time and place. Let no man marvel at the same. For though they as blind through unbelief and led astray through error even of kind, knew not the true eternal God, or if they did him know, yet they did not acknowledge him, but vainly did bestow the honor of the Maker on the creature. Yet it doth behoove us all, who are rightly instructed in the sooth, to think and say that God alone is he that rules all things and worketh all in all, as Lord of lords and King of kings, with whom there are no other gods that any sway may bear, no fatal law to bind him by, no fortune for to fear, for gods and fate and fortune are the terms of heathenness, if men usurp them in the sense that Paynims do express. But if we will reduce their sense to right of Christian law, to signify three other things, this terms we well may draw. By gods we understand all such as God himself hath plat and chief estate to punish sin and for the godly folk's grief. By fate, the order which is set and stablished in things by God's eternal will and word, which in due seasons bring all matters to their falling out, which falling out or end, because our curious reason is too weak to comprehend the cause and order of the same, and doth behold it fall unawares to us, by name of chance or fortune we it call. If any man will say these things may better learned be out of divine philosophy or scripture, I agree that nothing may in worthiness with holy wit compare. Howbeit so far forth as these things no whit impeachment are to virtue and to godliness, but furtherers of the same, I trust we may them safely use without desert of blame. And yet there are, and those not of the rude and vulgar sort, but such as have godliness and learning good report, that think the poets took their first occasion of these things from Holy Writ, as from the well from whence all wisdom springs. What man is he, but would suppose the author of this book, the first foundation of his work, from Moses' writings took? Not only in effect he doth with Genesis agree, but also in the order of creation, save that he makes no distinction of the days. For what else is all that shapeless, rude, and pestered heap which chaos he doth call, than even that universal mass of things, which God did make in one whole lump before that each their proper place did take, of which the Bible saith that in the first beginning God made heaven and earth, the earth was waste, and darkness yet abode the upon the deep, which holy words declare unto us plain, that fire, air, water, and the earth did undistinct remain in one gross body at the first. For God the Father that made all things, framing out the world according to the plat, conceived everlastingly the mind, made first of all both heaven and earth uncorporeal, and such as could not fall as objects under sense of sight, and also under air likewise, and emptiness. And for these twain apt terms he did devise. He called air darkness, for the air by kind is dark, and emptiness by the name of depth full aptly he did mark. For emptiness is deep and waste by nature. Overmore he formed also bodiless, as other things before, the natures both of water and of spirit. And in fine, the light, which being made to be a pattern most divine, whereby to form the fixed stars and wandering planets 7, with all the lights that afterwards should beautify the heaven, was made by God both bodiless and of so pure a kind, as that it could only be perceived by the mind. To this effect are follows words. And certainly this same is that poets in their work confused chaos name. Not that God's works at any time were packed confusedly together, but because no place nor outward shape whereby to show them to the feeble sense of man deceitful sight was yet appointed unto things, until that by his might and wondrous wisdom God in time set open to the eye the things that he before all time had everlastingly decreed by his providence. But let us further see how Ovid's scantlings with the whole true pattern do agree. The first day by his mighty words, saith Moses, God made light. The second the firmament, which heaven or welkin height. The third day he did part the earth from sea and make it dry, commanding it to bear all kind of fruits abundantly. The fourth day he did make the lights of heaven to shine from high, and establish it a law in them to rule their courses by. The fifth day he did make the whales and fish of the deep, with all the birds and feathered fowls that in the air do keep. The sixth day God made every beast, both wild and tame, and worms that creep on the ground according to their several kinds and forms. And in the image himself he formed man of clay to be the Lord of all his works the very self-same day. This is the sum of Moses' words. And Ovid, whether it were by following of the text aright, or that his mind did bear him witness that there are no gods but one, doth plain hold the God, although he knew it not, was he that did unfold the former chaos, putting it in form and fashion new, as may appear by this his words, which underneath ensue. This strife did God and nature break, and set in order do. The earth from heaven, the sea from earth he parted orderly, and from the thick and foggy air he took the lightsome sky. In these few lines he comprehends the whole effect of that which God did work the first 3 days about this noble plat. And then by distributions he entreateth by and by more largely of the self-same things, and paints them out to eye with all their bounds and furniture. And whereas we do find the term of nature joined with God, according to the mind of learned men, by joining so, is meant none other thing, but the Lord of nature, who did all in order bring. The distributions being done right learnedly anon. To show the other 3 days' works he thus proceedeth on. The heavenly soil to goddess and stars and planets first he gave. The waters next, both fresh and salt, he let the fishes have. The subtle air to flickering fowls and birds he hath assigned. The earth to beasts both wild and tame of sundry sorts and kind. Thus partly in the outward phrase, but more in very deed, he seems according to the sense of Scripture to proceed. And when he comes to speak to man, he doth not vainly say, as some have written, that He was before all time for aye. No mentioneth mo gods than one in making him, but thus he both in sentence and in sense his meaning doth discuss. How be it yet of all this while the creature wanting was far more divine, of nobler mind, which should the residue pass in depth of knowledge, reason, wit, and high capacity, and which of all the residue should the Lord and ruler be, then either he that made the world and things in order set of heavenly seed engendered man, or else the earth as yet young, lusty, fresh, and in her flower, and parted from the sky but late before, the seeds thereof as yet held inwardly. The which Prometheus, tempering straight with water of the spring, did make in likeness to the goddess that govern everything. What other thing means Ovid here by terms of heavenly seed than man's immortal soul, which is divine and comes indeed from heaven, and was inspired by God, as Moses showeth plain. And whereas of Prometheus he seems to add a vain device, as though he meant that he had formed man of clay, although it be a tale put in for pleasure by the way. Yet by the interpretation of the main we well may gather he did include a mystery and a secret meaning rather. This word Prometheus signifies a person sage and wise, of great foresight, who headily will nothing enterprise. It was the name of one that first did images invent, of whom the poets do report that he up to heaven went, and there stole fire, through which he made his images alive, and therefore that he formed men, the Paynims did contrive. Now when the poet read, perchance, that God Almighty by his providence and by his word, which everlastingly is I his wisdom, made the world, and also man to bear his image, and to be the Lord of all things that were erst made, and that he shaped them of earth or slimy clay, he took occasion in the way of fabling for to say that wise Prometheus tempering earth with water of the spring, did form it, like the gods above that govern everything. Thus made Prometheus seem to be the eternal word of God, his wisdom and his providence, which formeth man of clod. And where all other things behold the ground with groveling eye, he gave to man a stately look, replete with majesty, and wild him to behold the heavens with countenance cast on high, to mark and understand what things are in the starry sky. In these same words, both parts of man the poet doth express, as in a glass, and giveth us instruction to address ourselves to know our own estate, as that we be not born to follow lust, or serve the paunch like brutish beasts forlorn, but for to lift our eyes as well of body as of mind to heaven, as to our native soil, from whence we have by kind our better part, and by the sight thereof to learn to know and acknowledge him that dwelleth there, and wholly to bestow our care and travel to the praise and glory of his name, who for the sakes of mortal men created the first the same. Moreover, by the golden age, what other thinking is meant than Adam's time in paradise, who being innocent did lead a blissed and happy life until that thorough sin he fell from God, from which time forth all sorrow did begin. The earth, accursed for his sake, did ever after more yield food without great toil. Both heat and cold did vex him sore. Disease of body, care of mind, with hunger, thirst, and need. Fear, hope, joy, grief, and trouble fell on him and on his seed. And this is termed the Silver Age. Next, which there did succeed the Brazen Age, when malice first in people's hearts did breed, which never ceased growing till it so far outraged that nothing but destruction could the heat thereof assuage. For why men's stomachs, waxing hard to steel against their God, provoked him from day to day to strike them with his rod. Proud giants also did arise, that with presumptuous wills heaped wrong on wrong, and sin on sin, like huge and lofty hills, whereby they strove to climb to heaven, and God from thence to draw, in scorning his holy word and breaking nature's law. For which anon ensued the flood which overflowed all, the whole round earth, and drowned quite of all creatures great and small, excepting few that God did save, a seed whereof should grow another offspring. All these things the poet here doth show and colour, altering both the names of persons, time, and place. For where, according to the truth of Scripture in this case, the universal flood did fall but 1600 years, and 56 after the creation, as appears by reckoning of the age of the fathers under Noah, with whom 7 other persons no like safeguard did enjoy within the ark, which at the end of 1 whole year did stay upon the hills of Harmony. The poet following the fables of the Glorian Greeks, who shamelessly did take the praise of all things to themselves, in fabling wise doth make it happen in Deucalion's time, who reigned in Thessaly 800 winters since Noah's flood thereupon well nigh, because that in the reign of him a mighty flood did fall, that drowned the greater part of Greece, towns, cattle, folk, and all, save few that by the help of bows attained unto him, and to the highest of the forked Parnassus top did swim. And for by cause that he and his were driven a while to dwell among the stony hills and rocks until the water fell, the poets hereupon did take occasion for to feign that he and Pyrrha did repair mankind of stones again. Let's leave it here for tonight. Thank you for letting me read to you. Please check the description for where to buy my art and my channel page for where to send me a one-time donation. And I'll see you tomorrow.